So if you're a fan of the channel, God bless you, you crazy mofo, you may recall that I recently reviewed the uber cheap Poco M3, cost you well under 200 quid, unfortunately held back by slightly ropey performance. Well, bollocks to that anyway, because it's already obsolete, because along strolls the Poco M3 Pro 5G, an upgraded version of the standard Poco M3, now with beefier performance courtesy of a MediaTek Dimensity 700 chipset. Yes, that is fully 5G-ified, and it's landing right here in Blighty on July the 8th. Now, the base model of the Poco M3 Pro 5G sports 4 gigs of RAM and 64 gigs of storage, and that will cost you 179 quid here in the UK, but if you're super fast, you can snaffle it for the early bird price of 139 quid. And when I say super fast, I ain't kidding, you'll have to be quicker than Usain Bolt with a firecracker lodged up his arse, because that early bird offer ends at midnight July the 9th. Otherwise, for just 20 quid more, you can get 6 gigs of RAM and double the storage. So that's £199 normally, otherwise 159 quid with the early bird price. So enough of the yakety yak, I'm going to whip the Poco M3 Pro 5G on out of the box, take you on a full-on tour of the hardware and the software, and compare it directly with the original Poco M3 to see what the difference is. And for more on the latest and greatest tech, please do poke subscribe and ding that notifications bell. Cheers! Please, really hope they sent me the yellow one. No, they haven't. They sent me the black one. Arse. But anyway, also bundled in the box, you get one adapter. You get one handily labeled USB cable. You got a charming little sheet of stickers. Slap them on your kids, slap them on your cat. Let the world know what a Poco fan you are. And oh yes, fellow Spartans, you do indeed get a rubber Johnny condom case bundled in there to keep your Poco M3 Pro nice and safe. And that's your lot, nice and easy. So now let's check out the Poco M3 Pro. Now the Poco M3 Pro, much like the Poco M3, is constructed from plastic around back, although it's gone for a very different style of design. While the original Poco M3 had this sort of hardened leather style textured finish, you've got a perfectly glossy smooth finish here on the Poco M3 Pro. It's kind of like a frosted mirror style finish. I do actually quite like it. It looks very neat, very smart. Although unsurprisingly is proven a little bit of a fingerprint grease magnet already, despite the quite dark finish on this Power Black model. You can grab the Poco M3 Pro in 3 different colors. This is the Power Black. You can also grab it in Cool Blue or Poco Yellow, and hopefully that's at least as yellow as the box. Once again, of course, you have that highly unsubtle bit of Poco branding around back, so certainly nobody is going to be asking you what kind of phone you're rocking. And around front on the Poco M3 Pro, you've got Gorilla Glass 3 protecting that display as well, just like on the original. And as an added bonus, you also get a pre-installed screen protector here on the Poco M3 Pro as well, so pretty safe. Now if you just poke open the old SIM tray and see what we're working with here. And what we have here is space for 2 SIM cards at the same time. And also you can slip in a micro SD memory card, although you'll have to do that in the second SIM slot. There's not a dedicated slot for that, unlike the original Poco M3. Alright, so I've fully set up the Poco M3 Pro 5G, and on here is a good bit of Android 11 action with, of course, MiUI 12 slathered on top, how we know and love it. I'm not going to spend long banging on about MiUI 12, because if you've seen any of my coverage of Poco phones, Mi phones, or anything like that this year, you'll know my thoughts on this. In a nutshell, it's the most stock Android version of MiUI that we've had so far. So you've got an app store by default, which is great. You can drag down that notifications bar. You've got the excellent control center, which has been completely shamelessly ripped off from iOS, and I really like it. Fast access to all of your main toggles. Got the Google Discover feed, all of that good shenanigans. Downsides are, unfortunately, you get tons of crapware pre-installed on any kind of MIUI device. Lots of generic games like Block Puzzle, Bubble Popper, Jewel all kinds of stuff like that. My own personal favourite, Tile Fun, which is about as fun as a kick in the kidneys. And then on top of that, you've got your TikToks, your Facebooks, your LinkedIns, all of that shenanigans, which thankfully can be uninstalled, which is the one saving grace. So yes, LinkedIn, very much off you And I do enjoy the little celebrations every time you uninstall something like Facebook, little whee, off it goes. And of course, with MIUI devices, you're not guaranteed the same sort of level of support for updates and security updates in particular that you will get from other manufacturers like OnePlus and Nokia. But that said, I know quite a lot of people who've still got a Redmi smartphone, for instance, from about 3-4 years ago, still running absolutely fine. Now, one feature which you get here on the Poco M3 Pro 5G, which you didn't get on the standard Poco M3, is a good bit of NFC support. So there should be somewhere hidden amongst this sea of icon. There it is, right at the very bottom. Got a bit of NFC, so that's good news. And then if we dive on into the settings and go to About Phone, you'll see you've got a choice of either 64 or 128 gigs of storage with the Poco M3 Pro. It's UFS 2.2 storage. I've got the 128 gig model. And so far, no real surprises whatsoever. Seems to be running reasonably smoothly and everything. Now the Poco M3 Pro 5G sports a 6.5-inch IPS display, pretty bog standard for a sub £200 budget smartphone. It's a tiny bit smaller than the standard Poco M3's display, but we're talking fractions here, and it's essentially the same output. You've got a Full HD Plus resolution, so you get reasonably fine detail despite the size of this thing. Colours aren't exactly super poppy, in your face, oh my god, when you're watching a bit of anime or animation or whatever, but they're absolutely fine. They don't look muted or saturated. Viewing angles are fine as well. Top brightness levels, not amazing though, so you might struggle to see what's going on a very bright sunshiny day. And while the original Poco M3 sported a rather quaint, old-fashioned notch up top, you've got your more standard sphincter cutout right here on the Poco M3 Pro, centrally positioned, which is now all the rage, of course. And also, if we dive on into the display settings on the Poco M3 Pro, you'll notice another upgrade here compared with the original Poco M3, and that is the fact that you've now got a 90Hz refresh rate option. And this is apparently dynamic refresh as well, so it can actually scale itself down to 60 or even 30Hz when you're doing something that doesn't require that fast refresh rate, just to help preserve the battery life. And here you've got the usual standard display settings as well. You can boost those colors with the saturated mode, which to be honest doesn't really make a huge amount of difference anyway, and you can also play around with the color temperature. And one feature here on the Poco M3 Pro that I'm super keen to test out is the upgraded auto brightness. May not sound particularly exciting, but that's just the auto brightness on the original Poco M3 was about as reliable as a candy floss helmet. The main problem with the original Poco M3 was that the screen was always still too dark at night time. I always had to manually boost up the brightness, but apparently you've now got dual light sensors here on the Poco M3 Pro, one at the front and one around the back. And apparently this will help to keep that screen at just the perfect level of brightness at all times. As I say, I'll be testing that out for my review. As for your audio, well, the speaker system is of course just a mono speaker down here below. You don't get a stereo speaker output, but let's bump up the volume, see if it's any good. More on the latest and greatest tech, please do subscribe and ding that notifications bell. Cheers. Wise words. Okay, so not super loud on that top volume, but loud enough to be heard over, you know, a reasonable amount of background clamour, and the clarity is pretty strong, at least on that top volume, so that's to be commended. You do actually have a headphone jack up top as well, thank Christ, here on the Poco M3 Pro. Full high-res audio certification as well, so you can get your high-clarity tracks on the go. But the most important area where the Poco M3 Pro drops its trousers and waves its willy at the standard Poco M3 is the performance, because you've got the much beefier MediaTek 700 chipset packed in this thing compared with the Snapdragon 662 banged in the original Poco M3. I've already noticed just from playing with the Poco M3 Pro for sort of an hour or two now that the performance is much smoother. As you can see, the Geekbench score is much better as well. Occasionally an app can take a little while to load up here on the Poco M3 Pro, but it definitely seems that overall they seem to have sorted one of the major bugbears I had with the original Poco M3. Is that, oh, there we go, eventually get a bit of Netflix on the go. But yeah, it seems to be a lot smoother just in general, navigating the UI, stuff like that. Let's try testing out a bit of Call of Duty action as well. So no, let's not play block puzzle or bubble shooter. Let's play a bit of Call of Duty. And as usual, when you're playing a game like Call of Duty, PubG, whatever your game of choice may be, just gotta swipe it in from this diagonal corner. We'll get there in the end. And this opens up the Game Turbo menu. And as you can see there, you can bring up other apps in the foreground, just in a little window. You can do some chatting. You can record your gaming session for posterity's sake. You can clear up all the resources, so free up some memory if things are starting to chug. Despite the fact that the Dimensity 700 is fairly capable as far as budget-friendly chipsets are concerned, it looks like Call of Duty Mobile right now does max out at medium graphics quality and high frame rates. Let's give it a go. So I played a couple of quick matches on Call of Duty Mobile. I wasn't particularly good as usual, but the phone was absolutely flawless. I didn't notice any judders or any little performance issues. Played absolutely fine on that frame rate. Screen seemed nice and responsive, so definitely no problems there. Sound came through nice and clear through that mono speaker. Just had to make sure I didn't accidentally muffle it. But of course, I'll be doing lots more gaming testing on the Poco M3 Pro 5G ahead of my in-depth review to see if it starts to overheat under stress or anything like that. I'd be very surprised if it did though, because the Dimensity chipsets tend to be pretty energy efficient, and you got that built-in 5G support as well, so a bit of extra future-proofing that you didn't get with the standard Poco M3. And that 5G support is shared among both of the SIM slots as well, so if you do do have two SIMs in there, you're switching between them for data, both of them will be able to access 5G networks. However, one area where the original Poco M3 does actually have an advantage over the Poco M3 Pro 5G is the battery, because that thing had a 6,000 milliamp capacity cell crammed inside. It's a mere 5,000 milliamp battery here on the Poco M3 Pro. Should still prove absolutely fine for a day and a half or so of use between charges, though, even with quite a bit of screen on time. I've been pounding the crap out of this thing for the last sort of hour and a half, 2 hours, lots of media streaming, good bit of gaming and stuff as well, and it hasn't dropped too much at all, so yeah, shouldn't be a problem. And when it is time to recharge the Poco M3 Pro, it's basic 18 watt fast charge, not particularly quick, but pretty much what you'd expect at this sort of price point. And of course, no wireless charging support or any of that shenanigans. Now let's finish up with a squint at the Poco M3 Pro's camera tech, and it's a triple lens setup here on the arse end of this smartphone. It seems to be exactly the same hardware as the standard Poco M3. So what we got here is a 48 megapixel primary shooter, which does actually shoot 12 megapixel images by default using pixel binning. Let's get the HDR support on the go. It will take a little bit longer to shoot and process an HDR photo, but it'll be worth the wait when you've got a high dynamic range. Bit of strong contrast in your scene. Anyone who's used a Xiaomi or a Poco smartphone in recent times will know exactly what you're getting here. You've got your Pro mode with full manual controls. You can play around with the likes of the shutter speed, ISO level, white balance. And if you want to, you can get that full 48 megapixel action on the go too. The other two lenses slapped on the back end of the Poco M3 Pro are a 2 megapixel depth sensor for your portrait shots, just add a nice bokeh style effect in the background, and you can tweak that to make it a bit more severe or lessen it. And the final lens in this trio is Hip Hip Huzzah, a 2 megapixel macro lens. How we love it. Oh, that's probably going to give me nightmares tonight. And yeah, you can get up close and personal with your subject using this, but it shoots 2 megapixel resolution photos. They're going to be grainy and crap, so frankly you might as well just use the standard lens and then crop in. And then if you tap on more, you've got access to a small variety of bonus modes as well, including dedicated night mode, which can take lots of different shots at different aperture settings and then meld them all together. Got your dedicated 48 megapixel mode there as well if you want. And then if we swap to video, I'm not sure what the maximum resolution is. Let's check it out. So it looks like 1080p at 30 frames per second. Unfortunately, no 4K option here on the Poco M3 Pro. I will of course be fully tested the camera tech for my in-depth review, and then if we swap around to the front, it is a basic 8 megapixel shooter, again just like the bog standard Poco M3, so I'm not expecting great results out of that. Certainly in lower, more ambient light, it really fell on its arse. But you know, that one right there, definitely a keeper. So that right there in a nutshell is the Poco M3 Pro. As I say, going on sale here in Byeeeeeee from July the 8th. If you want those early bird prices, 40 quid off, so definitely worth it. Then you're going to have to jump in there fairly fast because they end July the 9th at midnight. And fingers crossed this Pro model will solve most of the issues with the original Poco M3, the juddery performance and the balked screen brightness, just to name two. Of course, the camera still looks pretty basic, unfortunately, so if you are going to be prioritizing your photos and your videos and all that, I'd maybe look to get something a little different. Anyway, full review inbound, as I say, so please do let me know what you think down in the comments below. If there's any particularly burning questions or anything I can hopefully answer for you in my review, let me know. And in the meantime, please do subscribe, ding that notifications bell, have yourselves a fantastic rest of the week. And that's it. Cheers. Love you.